January may look like the slowest and quietest part of the gardening year, but experienced growers know something important. This is actually when the season truly begins. While many people are still waiting for spring to arrive, productive gardeners are already growing the foundation of their future harvests indoors, under lights, near sunny windows, and inside seed trays quietly filling with life. And here's the truth most beginners learn too late. Some vegetables simply cannot afford a late start. If you wait until warm weather arrives to sow everything, certain crops will never fully recover. They need extra time to build roots, leaves, and strength long before they ever reach the garden. Miss that early growing window, and you often end up with smaller harvests, weaker plants, or disappointing results no matter how carefully you garden later. These 6 vegetables are especially dependent on an early beginning. If you want stronger growth, earlier harvests, and plants that reach their full potential, January is the moment to start them. 1. Leeks. Leeks are often described as elegant relatives of onions, but they demand even more patience and planning. Unlike onions, leeks are not grown for bulbs. Their value comes from the long, thick, pale stems that develop slowly over many months. Reaching that size takes time, usually 5 to 6 months or even longer, which is exactly why starting them in January makes such a huge difference. When leeks are started too late, they rarely catch up properly. Instead of producing thick, tender stalks, they often remain thin, weak, and underdeveloped, no matter how much care they receive later in the season. Early sowing changes everything. During the first few weeks, leek growth can appear frustratingly slow. Above the soil, very little seems to happen. But beneath the surface, the roots are steadily building strength and structure. That quiet underground development is what later allows the plant to become large, productive, and cold tolerant. And leeks are remarkably cold tolerant once established. Strong young leek plants can survive cool spring weather far better than many vegetables. But this only works if the seedlings already have enough strength before transplanting outdoors, which is another major reason January sowing matters so much. To grow them successfully, sow leek seeds into trays or containers filled with fine seed-starting mix. Plant them slightly deeper than onion seeds and keep the soil evenly moist. Consistent moisture and strong light are extremely important because leeks dislike stress during early development. Sudden changes in watering, temperature, or light can slow their growth for weeks. As the seedlings mature, narrow, upright leaves begin forming in dense clusters. By spring, healthy plants should become sturdy enough for transplanting into trenches or deep planting holes outside. As the leeks continue growing, soil is gradually pulled around the stems in a process called blanching. This blocks sunlight from reaching the lower stalks and creates the long, white, tender stems prized in cooking. By autumn, properly started leeks reward patience with thick, sweet, mild stalks that often taste even better after exposure to cold weather. Some varieties can remain harvestable even through frost and light snow. Leeks started too late almost never reach the same quality. January is what separates thin, struggling plants from large, flavorful, harvest-ready leeks. 2. Onions. Onions are one of the clearest examples of why timing matters in gardening. They may look simple, but they quietly punish gardeners who start too late. If your goal is large, healthy bulbs, an early indoor start is not optional. It's essential. What makes onions unusual is the way bulb formation works. Unlike many crops, onions do not begin forming bulbs based mainly on temperature. Instead, they respond to changing day length. As spring transitions into early summer and daylight hours increase, onions receive a signal to stop focusing on leaf production and begin swelling underground into bulbs. But there's one major problem. If the plant is still small when that signal arrives, the final onion stays small too. No amount of watering or fertilizing later can fully compensate for lost early growth. Starting onions in January gives them a massive advantage because those extra indoor weeks allow the plants to develop strong roots and multiple healthy leaves before outdoor planting ever begins. And every single leaf matters. Each leaf grown during early development eventually becomes one ring inside the finished onion bulb. More leaves early on usually means larger onions later. Growing onions from seed also gives gardeners access to far more variety than onion sets provide. You can choose sweet onions, storage onions, red, yellow, or white varieties, along with the correct day-length type for your climate. Whether you grow long day, short day, or intermediate onions, all benefit tremendously from a January start, especially in regions with shorter growing seasons. To sow onions, scatter seeds densely in shallow trays and cover them lightly with soil. Onion seeds don't need deep planting, but they do need consistent moisture and bright light. Within a week or two, thin green shoots begin appearing like blades of grass. At first they may seem fragile and unimpressive, but this stage is incredibly important for building future bulb size. Strong lighting prevents the seedlings from stretching weakly upward. As they grow taller, trimming the tops down to about 3 or 4 inches actually improves development. This simple step encourages thicker stems, better root growth, and stronger overall plants. By early spring, healthy onion seedlings should become roughly pencil thick and ready for transplanting outdoors. Once planted into the garden, they quickly accelerate because they already have a major developmental head start. Gardeners who skip January sowing often wonder why their onions remain undersized or fail to bulb properly. The answer usually began months earlier, before the season even started. 3. Peppers. Peppers love heat, sunshine, and long summer days, but they absolutely hate being rushed. Out of many common garden vegetables, peppers are some of the slowest to develop from seed. Germination alone may take 2 or even 3 weeks, and once the seedlings finally appear, growth remains gradual for quite a while. That slow pace is exactly why January is such an important time to start them. Peppers need far more than just time to sprout leaves. They need months to build thick stems, strong branching structures, and deep root systems capable of supporting heavy harvests later in the season. When peppers are started too late, they often run out of time before reaching full maturity, especially in regions with shorter summers. Beginning them in January gives the plants a huge advantage. Instead of struggling to catch up once spring arrives, they spend the cold months steadily developing indoors in a warm, protected environment. By the time outdoor temperatures become suitable, the plants are already sturdy, established, and far stronger than newly germinated seedlings. Temperature is extremely important during germination. Pepper seeds prefer warmth between about 75 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Without enough heat, germination becomes slow, uneven, or may fail completely. Many gardeners use heating mats during winter because cold soil can cause seeds to rot before they ever sprout. Once the seedlings emerge, strong light becomes just as important as warmth. Bright, direct lighting prevents weak, stretched growth and encourages thicker stems that can later support larger harvests. One of the biggest benefits of an early start is structural development. Peppers started in January have more time to branch before flowering begins, and every branch eventually becomes another location capable of producing flowers and fruit. More branches early in life almost always means more peppers later on. Late-started plants often begin flowering while still small and underdeveloped. As a result, they produce fewer blooms, smaller harvests, and delayed ripening that may continue dangerously close to cool autumn weather. This becomes especially important in cooler climates where the growing season is limited. Peppers started early can continue producing steadily through summer and well into fall. Plants started too late often manage only a small harvest before temperatures begin dropping again. Peppers reward gardeners who think ahead. Give them a strong January beginning, and they respond with larger harvests, thicker fruit walls, richer flavor, stronger plants, and earlier production throughout the season. But if that early window is missed, even perfect summer weather often cannot fully recover the lost growing time. 4. Eggplant. Eggplant follows a very similar pattern to peppers, but in many ways it's even more demanding. These plants require warmth, stability, and a long, uninterrupted growing period from the very beginning. If they experience stress early in life, they rarely perform at their full potential later on. Like peppers, eggplants grow slowly from seed. Germination may take several weeks, and young seedlings often seem inactive above the soil because most of their early energy goes into root development. That quiet root-building stage is incredibly important. Starting eggplants in January gives them time to develop strong underground systems and thick woody stems long before outdoor planting begins. Those early structures later determine how much fruit the plant can support successfully. Eggplants eventually produce large, heavy fruits, and weak, immature plants often struggle badly under that weight. Poorly developed plants may drop flowers, fail to pollinate properly, or produce very little fruit at all. Late-started eggplants sometimes appear healthy at first glance, but they rarely develop enough strength to produce truly heavy harvests. Early-started plants behave very differently. By the time spring arrives, January-started eggplants are already mature enough to transition quickly into active growth outdoors. Instead of slowing down after transplanting, they often begin accelerating rapidly as temperatures rise. Warm soil and stable weather encourage flowering and fruit production instead of forcing the plant to spend extra energy simply trying to survive. Timing matters because eggplants need a very long season from start to finish, not only to grow leaves and stems, but also to flower, pollinate, set fruit, and fully mature those fruits before cold weather returns. In many climates, summer warmth arrives quickly and disappears just as fast. If eggplants are started too late, they may still be focusing on basic growth during the exact period when they should already be producing fruit. Strong early development creates thicker stems, better airflow through the plant, improved pollination, and stronger branching, capable of supporting larger harvests. Flowers remain attached more reliably, fruits develop more evenly, and the final eggplants become smoother, firmer, darker, and richer in flavor. Late-started plants often manage only a handful of undersized fruits before temperatures begin falling. Meanwhile, eggplants started properly in January can continue producing deep into late summer and sometimes well into autumn. If you want glossy, richly colored eggplants growing from strong, productive plants instead of weak, disappointing harvests, January sowing is not just helpful. It's one of the most important decisions of the entire growing season. 5. Celery. Celery is one of the most underestimated vegetables in home gardening, and also one of the most challenging. Many beginners expect it to grow quickly like lettuce or herbs, but celery follows a completely different rhythm. It develops slowly, demands consistency, and strongly depends on an early start. If you miss the January planting window, the final harvest usually suffers because of it. Unlike fast-growing crops, celery needs an extremely long season to fully mature, often requiring 4 to 5 months or even longer before it's ready to harvest. And during the early stages, growth can seem almost invisible. For weeks after germination, celery seedlings remain tiny and delicate. At times, it may feel like the plants have stopped growing altogether, but this slow development is completely normal. While very little appears above the soil, the plant is quietly building the root system that will later support thick, crisp stalks. This is exactly why January sowing is so important. Starting celery early gives the plant enough time to establish itself gradually instead of forcing rapid growth later in the season. Slow early development creates stronger plants and far better harvests. Celery seeds themselves are extremely small, almost dust-like, and they require light in order to germinate properly. If they're buried too deeply, they may never sprout at all. The soil surface must remain evenly moist during germination, because even short periods of dryness can interrupt or completely stop the process. Temperature also matters enormously. Celery germinates best between roughly 65 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit, conditions that are much easier to maintain indoors during January than outdoors in early spring. Once the seedlings emerge, patience becomes one of the gardener's most important skills. Above the soil, celery grows slowly and carefully. Thin stems and small leaves gradually appear over time, often testing the patience of inexperienced gardeners. But below the surface, the roots are steadily expanding. And that hidden root development is what ultimately determines whether the final stalks become thick, juicy, and tender. Celery prefers cooler growing conditions but reacts badly to stress. Heat, drought, uneven watering, or sudden temperature swings can quickly damage quality. When stressed, celery often becomes bitter, stringy, hollow, or tough instead of crisp and mild. Starting early helps solve this problem because the plants have time to mature before the hottest part of summer arrives. Gardeners who wait until spring often spend the entire season struggling with weak plants that bolt too early or never properly thicken at all. In many cases, the final harvest barely feels worth the effort. But celery started in January enters the garden already strong, rooted, and prepared for steady development. By summer, the plants are mature enough to tolerate warmer conditions without losing quality. With celery, timing changes everything, and January is often the difference between frustration and success. 6. Artichokes. Artichokes are not ordinary vegetables. They belong to an entirely different category of gardening, one that requires patience, planning, and long-term thinking. But for gardeners willing to invest that time, artichokes produce one of the most impressive and rewarding harvests possible in a home garden. From seed, artichokes develop very slowly. Many varieties require 8 months, sometimes even a full year, before they become mature enough to produce edible buds. Because of that, starting them early is absolutely essential. January gives artichokes the long developmental period they need to build strength, size, and stored energy before the main growing season begins. Without enough early growth, artichoke plants often produce large leaves and impressive foliage, but never actually form harvestable buds. One of the most fascinating things about artichokes is that they rely on temperature signals to trigger bud production. Most varieties need exposure to cooler temperatures during a certain stage of growth before flowering begins. However, the plant must already be mature enough to respond properly to those environmental signals. Small, underdeveloped seedlings simply cannot react correctly. By starting in January, artichokes become established early enough that spring temperature changes naturally encourage bud formation instead of causing stress. As the plants mature, they develop thick stems, large silver-green leaves, and dramatic architectural shapes that stand out beautifully in the garden. Healthy artichokes become massive plants with a striking presence, but only when they receive enough time to fully develop. Gardeners who sow too late often end up with impressive-looking plants that never actually produce edible buds. The foliage may appear lush and healthy, yet the harvest never arrives. In most cases, the problem is not poor care, it's timing. Artichokes started in January enter the season far ahead of schedule. They grow faster, respond more effectively to environmental cues, and have a much better chance of producing large, tender buds during their very first year. And once established, many artichoke plants continue producing for several seasons, making that early January investment even more valuable over time. With artichokes, patience at the beginning often creates harvests that return year after year.